Denver Nuggets managed to capture their first championship in franchise history last season, running through the entirety of the NBA, and it looks like they're going to do it again. They started off slow this season, but couldn't be playing better basketball heading into the playoffs.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! With 0.6 of a second remaining.
Yo, Deserved, welcome back to another episode of Game Time. It's your boy Dom, and we're going to jump right into things here today. Now, if you guys do enjoy today's episode, make sure you guys drop a like and subscribe for more. It is greatly appreciated, but without further ado, let's talk some Nuggets basketball. Now, before we get too far into things, I do want to say I am a Nuggets fan, so take that, or take my opinions here, I guess, with a grain of salt. There might be some bias sprinkled in there, I can only take that out as much as humanly possible, right? But yeah, the Nuggets, man. The Nuggets sit at the number one seed in the Western Conference, currently sitting at 51-21, the second best record in the entire league. Currently, OKC sits at 2 at 49-21, and Minnesota at 49-22, both being really the only two in play at this point to really take that number one seed away from the Nuggets. And it is good because, well, the Nuggets, they play Minnesota two more times to finish out the season, and just played them the other day and got a win over them as well. So it has helped separate them in this conversation. And really, I think you can look back to, and I know this is going to be a weird sample size, but you can look back to the last 17 games, and that's really where it's like, okay, the Nuggets are kind of getting back into playoff shape, and this is a scary freaking team. And I could say the last 20 games, right, that would be a typical sample size. But there was a 3-game losing streak to kind of start the last 20 games, and I really want to look at how they've kind of just taken it to a whole nother level since then, right? They lost to Sacramento, lost to Milwaukee, and lost to Sacramento on a 3-game stretch, right? And since then, they've gone 15-2, with only 2 losses being Phoenix and a game winner from Dallas, right? Which I think a lot of people covered, especially, Dallas played absolutely amazing that game, and Kyrie hit a phenomenal shot to win that game. But outside of that, for the last 20 games, they've won 15, right? So even there, that's a 75% win percentage. But if you look at just the last 17, that's 15-2, which is insane, right? I mean, this is a team that is putting up points, right? Obviously, I think across the league, scoring has been up so much this year, but 117 points per game out of the Nuggets has been amazing to see. I think, 3-point percentage has been amazing, almost 40% as a team throughout this stretch. And yeah, it's just really been kind of dominance by the Nuggets is really the easiest way to put it. There have been some games where we've gotten kind of put behind. I think back to the Toronto game where I was at, and, we get behind by like 20, or I believe the furthest that Toronto got up was 22, right? And this was an injured Toronto team without Scotty Barnes. It was really RJ Barrett and the crew. And, I was sitting there and I was looking at some of them and I was like, who the hell are these guys? And I didn't even realize that Michael Porter's brother was on the team until I looked it up, and I was like, oh, that's Porter Jr.'s brother, right? I did see something funny on Instagram where somebody was like, how are they brothers? They have different last names. Well, maybe because he's not a junior as well, because he doesn't have the exact same name. God, people are stupid. Some NBA fans really make me just not understand how you're that dumb. And the same thing kind of happened at the Sacramento game, which I was at, where, Sacramento, they were also injured. Or I guess not necessarily injured. I don't think De'Aaron Fox was injured. He just didn't play that game, right? And so De'Aaron Fox wasn't playing. And again, we went down early, and it really took what I think is our best quarter, and that's the second quarter, kind of end of second quarter, start of third quarter is really where we play our best basketball, especially, against some of the teams that sometimes I think we look at, or I think the Nuggets just look at on the sheet, and it's like, oh, this should be a win. And sometimes they're not, because you give up such an early lead, kind of scratching them off the sheet. But other than that, I mean, there's been some really dominant wins. I think I look at Utah, a team that obviously isn't very good, but does match up size-wise very well, and usually, takes a couple games from us throughout the regular season. We put up 142 points on them and beat them by over 20. So I think that's a huge win. Plus, you've played a ton of other really good high caliber playoff teams. Currently on a 4-game win streak that started versus Minnesota, right? Then you go to and play New York, and you just body New York, right? You win by 3, but so I guess not really body, but you win against New York, and I think you've beat a lot of really good teams throughout the stretch. Obviously, Boston was a big game, nationally televised. That brought a lot of attention to kind of what the Nuggets were doing. I think Miami, being able to go rematch a team that you saw in the finals and hold them to 88 points and beat them by 22 is huge. The Lakers, you were able to beat by double digits. So there's a lot of really good wins throughout this stretch, and I think it's really started to kind of get the Nuggets back into playoff basketball mode, right? I think even when you look at across the whole season, this team is set up to potentially again win that championship that they're looking after. They are the sixth best offensive rating team in the entire league and the 10th best defensive rating team in the entire league. And, the formula to really win a championship is be top 10 in offense and top 10 in defense. And they are right there with both, right? Obviously, I think when you think of the Nuggets, you definitely think offense, but there have been so many guys that have stepped up on the defensive end, whether it's Aaron Gordon, who I think should be on a defensive team for sure, whether it's KCP, who always takes, the hardest guard assignment, whether it's off the bench, Christian Braun, Peyton Watson, both of them have been phenomenal defenders and have taken steps and strides from their rookie year, especially Peyton Watson. I think mostly when you look at what Christian Braun's done, it's been very similar to what he did last year, right? He's averaging 7.2 points this year with about 1.4 assists, 3.6 rebounds, half a steal, half a block per game. And that's pretty similar to what he did last year. It's a little bit better, but last year he scored about 4 points per game, 2.4 rebounds, 1 assist, half a steal. The blocks, I guess, have gotten a little bit better. Again, with him, though, it's still the free throws and the three-point percentage for me. Or I guess not necessarily the three-point percentage. I mean, last year he shot 35%, and this year he's shooting 37%. So from a technicality basis, he is shooting it okay. But again, it's only on about 1 attempts per game. This year a little bit closer to 2 attempts per game. And it's just not great. It's not great. It is something that he needs to improve. And then I think free throws is maybe where this team might have some sort of fault. And that's, you can look at Aaron Gordon, who it's almost a guarantee. He shoots 65% from the line, so it's not necessarily a guarantee. But when he walks to the line, it's like, okay, he's going 1 for 2 probably. And occasionally you get the 2 for 2. But yeah, his free throw shooting scares me a little bit come playoff time. And I do think it could be something that, teams key in on. Obviously, he's not a great 3-point shooter, only shooting 28%. Again, timely as well. I think him and Braun, even Peyton Watson, I think a lot of the guys that don't shoot a lot of threes or shoot them at a very high clip do hit them timely. And in good moments where it's like, okay, we needed that. That was a good shot, right? So I think that's something that is very beneficial. But when you only shoot 28% from 3, you only shoot 28% from 3, and that's something that opponents can kind of key in on. So I would say that my biggest worry come playoff time would be Aaron Gordon's, 3-point shooting and free throws, along with Christian Braun, and you can even extend that to Peyton Watson as well. A lot of guys that play a lot of minutes and are very important on the defensive side of the ball for us, right? Somebody that isn't as important on the defensive side of the ball, though, that has been very, very good for us this year is Reggie Jackson, right? This year, averaging about 10 points per game, 4 assists per game. And, he's just been a very good off the bench, go get a shot, playmaker type of guy, where he's able to create his own shot. He's able to create some shots for other people. Not like a phenomenal playmaker by any means. Like, it's not like he's out there like playing like Jokic or like Murray, right? But he is the third leader in assists on the team, and I think he's been very solid, right? I think that's just the best way to describe it. He's a guy that didn't play a lot for us last year. This year he's played 72 games, and of which he's also started 18. It gives the ability that, when Jamal is kind of dealing with a little bit of an injury, you can put Reggie Jackson in for a game, and he's going to give you good production, be able to play off Jokic very well, be able to create his own shot, even be able to run with the second unit as well, similarly to how Jamal does. And obviously it's a big jump from what he did last year, because last year he only played 16 games for us, averaged about 7 points. We didn't really use him at all in the playoffs. His shooting numbers were about 10% lower from field goal and 3-point percentage. This year, I think he's been a lot better just shooting the ball efficiently, as well as, just being an amazing off-the-bench scorer, which is something I hoped that we would have seen last year, but I'm very grateful that we're seeing it this year, because it's something that's needed. Because, again, when you look at that bench unit, Christian Braun and Peyton Watson, though both taking strides on the offensive end, are still primary defensive type of guys, right? I think Zeke Naji is somebody that we'll talk about here more in a minute, that I haven't necessarily loved what we've seen out of him. I think Justin Holiday's been solid when he gets minutes. He's been playing a little bit more of recently, and when he's able to get onto the court, I think he's just a solid role player. That's just the best way to describe it. Like, there's no one thing that I'm like, okay, Holiday's a great shooter, because okay, he shoots okay. It's on 2 attempts per game. He shoots about 41%. He's a solid defender, but it's not like he's like some elite, unstoppable defender, right? So I just think he's solid across the board and is a good veteran for us. Julian Strother's a guy that's played some games for us, playing about 42 to this point. So obviously, I think Malone is kind of starting to really key in on what that playoff rotation is going to look like, and him being the rookie and not shooting necessarily where we were potentially hoping that he would coming into the NBA, shooting only 30% on 3 attempts per game isn't exactly where we were looking at. So he's a guy that I expect we'll see what he does next year type of thing is where we're kind of at with Strother. And then honestly, the rest of the roster, you've got some of the bench guys that are fillers towards the rest of the bench. And then you've got DeAndre Jordan, who also plays some backup big minutes. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, the playoff rotation has been pretty much set by Malone, and it's kind of something that we already saw. I know some people, like outside of the Nuggets and outside of like being a Nuggets fan, were critical of the Nuggets not moving off of like a Peyton Watson or something like that to go get more of a veteran presence off the bench, right? Obviously, we had very good veterans off the bench in Bruce Brown and Jeff Green last year, who we don't have this year, and obviously Bruce Brown potentially will be a free agent, so I'd love to see him back. I actually got to meet Bruce Brown, so that was awesome at the rodeo/stock show when the Pacers were in town to play the Nuggets before he got traded, obviously. So I think that was sick. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see him back on the Nuggets next year, and we'll see if the Raptors decline his option or whatever. But yeah, we don't have that veteran presence off the bench, and I'm not mad at the Nuggets for it. Like, the one place where I would look at and I'd be like, look, we kind of need more here, and it's the part that concerns me a little bit, is that backup big position. I know Aaron Gordon runs some backup center. Obviously, you have the best center in the league, easily a top 3 player in the league unanimously, right? At that position, especially, like, it's not the biggest of concerns, but Zeke Naji just has not taken that jump that I wanted him to take. He's been injured as of late, but when you look across his career, I mean, he came in as a 40% shooter from 3, shot 46% his sophomore season, and ever since can't get out of 20-something% from 3-point range. I really thought he was going to be more of a stretch 5 slash really kind of corner sitting forward for us at the power forward position. And he just hasn't been that. He hasn't been phenomenal this year. His minutes have continued to go down over the last couple of years. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's a good offensive rebounder. I'll give him that. But beyond that, I just expected more out of him. And I didn't necessarily expect the jump that like Peyton Watson has taken, or even to be what Christian Braun has been for the team. But I did expect him as one of those younger guys to take his game at least to a little bit more of another level. He's a guy I didn't love when we drafted, but I really started to grow on the last couple of years, and it's just been a little bit disappointing to not see him really kind of take strides in his game this season. So I guess that's something I'd like to highlight. I mean, he comes in and he has some good games where he has good minutes, and he has some good games where it's like, or some, I guess not good games, he had some games where he comes in and it's like, oh, okay, those weren't the best minutes. Like, might have just been better to have DeAndre Jordan out there, right? So I do think that's something to say, and that's also something to point out. Like, it is also like an old DeAndre Jordan. Like, it's a 35-year-old DeAndre Jordan. So if it's better to have him out there, maybe there's another option to explore, and that'd be the one place I'd really be looking at to make moves. I know there were some rumors about like, oh, what about trading Porter Jr. and stuff like that? And honestly, I'd completely shoot those down. I remember I was commenting on something about that on Instagram, and I was like, look, unless we're trading Porter Jr. for like Luka Doncic, like I don't want to see it happen, because he is so integral to what we do. Obviously, you know, you have Jokic, who's the engine of the team. He truly is like an offense himself, right? One of the best players of all time, easily the best passing big of all time, and we'll get more into Jokic here in a minute. But beyond that, you've got like the 3-headed monster of the best role players in the league, right? Or 4. I mean, you can even say 4. You can throw KCP in there, right? He doesn't average like 15 to 20 like the other guys, but he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, and is willing to take some of the hardest defensive assignments from a guard perspective, night in and night out, right? But obviously the number one guy after Jokic would be Murray. And then it's Porter Jr. I mean, yeah, you could flip-flop Porter Jr. or Gordon for the third most important guy, but like, dude, Porter Jr., Gordon, and Murray are just like, they're a 3-headed monster behind Nikola Jokic that I look at them and I'm like, look, and this is no shade to the Cavaliers, because I really like the Cavaliers and what they've put together. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell's one of my favorite players, but you look at the Cavaliers and it's like, okay, Darius Garland's an all-star, Jared Allen's an all-star, there's been talk about Evan Mobley being an all-star. You can't tell me that Jamal Murray, Michael Porter, and Aaron Gordon don't provide just as much, if not more, than those 3 guys, because guess what? Those 3 on the Nuggets helped win a championship, right? So I think a lot of that, the reason they're not all-stars, obviously, is because it's the Western Conference. I would almost, if this team was in the East, I would lock at least Jamal Murray, if not one more, probably Aaron Gordon due to the defensive side of things, to be an all-star in the Eastern Conference. But because we are in the West, it makes that a lot more difficult. So I think a lot of people overlook Porter Jr. or Aaron Gordon or even Jamal Murray in those type of conversations. Probably not Jamal, but Porter and Gordon I think sometimes do get overlooked or overshadowed when it comes to like how important they are for the team, because Porter Jr. is one of the best catch and shoot players almost of all time, right? He's starting to get to that level. I mean, he is so consistent, shooting 40% on 7 attempts per game. Obviously, there's don't pass the rock Porter Jr., but sometimes there's a reason he does not pass the rock, and that's because this man knows how to shoot the ball, right? And I think him and Murray and Gordon, sometimes when Jokic comes off the court and we see, a combination, typically it's a combination of two of those three that'll run quite a bit with the bench unit, whether it's Gordon at like the 5 with the bench unit, or you just have Jamal and Porter, or you just have Porter kind of helping Reggie Jackson be more of a creator off the bench, right? They run a lot with those backups, and that's where you really see, I think, Michael Porter's ability to be truly a shot creator. Obviously, he'll never be what he was going to be due to all the injuries that he went through with his back. He was a guy, I remember when we drafted him, I was sitting in IHOP, and I watched the Clippers go one pick, and I can't, was it like Jerome Robinson, I want to say? And then the next pick was Shea. Obviously, Shea, I didn't know at the time, right, would be who he is, an MVP level type of player. But I remember sitting there and I go, they have to go. Like, there's no way they don't go Porter with one of these picks. I was flabbergasted that he'd made it this far, even with the medical concerns. And they didn't go with him. And I was like, if the Nuggets don't draft Michael Porter Jr., I don't know what I'm going to do. And I literally, jumped out of my seat in IHOP while I was watching the draft on my phone and just was hype as all hell. And yeah, I mean, he's been amazing. Obviously, when he got drafted, I was like, oh, this guy's got the potential to be even better than Jokic. And Jokic still wasn't where he's at now, obviously. And I didn't realize how severe the back things were. But man, I still think Porter can be better than what he is. And he's one of the best shooters in the league and is a really, really good scorer. I mean, he averages 17 points per game. Over those last 17 games that I was talking about, he's averaging over 20 points per game. So I think, yeah, he's been an amazing piece, or right at 20 points per game for those last 17. But he's just been an amazing piece. I think he's a guy that gets overlooked on this team a lot. So I did want to shed some light on him. But let's get into the bread and butter of, one of my favorite players on this team, a guy that has really just leveled up his game, and that's Peyton Watson, right? I think Christian Braun, he's developed this season, right, going from his rookie to sophomore year, but not to the level that Peyton Watson has. I mean, Peyton Watson straight up went from a guy that hardly played. He played 23 games last year and averaged 3 points, right? But you saw the potential. And I made a longer video about this earlier in the season, but he comes in, and this season he's doubled his points. He's become one of the best defenders in the entire league. He has, I believe, improved his 3-point shooting percentage. Let me double check that. No, technically it's gone down, but he's shooting more. So he's shooting 30% from 3. He's, averaging half a steal and a block per game. He's a guy that when he blocks the shot, that thing could go. That can go like 3 rows up. Like he has some amazing highlight plays, and it's just awesome. Honestly, he's just awesome to watch play defense. He's one of those guys that you enjoy watching play defense. When he gets, when they sub him in, it's like, oh, here we go. You're bringing in P-Watt. Like, he's guarding somebody. He's going to lock him up. You know what I mean? He's going to make a defensive play. He's going to get out in transition and get a dunk or something like that. So yeah, he's just slowly become one of my favorite players on this team, honestly. And yeah, I mean, there's no other way to put it. When you look at him from an advanced numbers perspective, right, his rim defense, he makes defenders shoot 14% less at the rim than like when guarded by any other player in the league, right? From an average player perspective, he makes them shoot 14% worse. It's 98th in rim defense percentage, right? He is 6'6", 6'7", right? That's insane to be in the 98th percentile, or even the block percentage of 93 percentile. He has a 97 percentile from a versatility standpoint, and that's because he literally guards every single position. He guards centers 12% of the time, and then he guards every other position a little bit more than that, obviously. But he guards, small forwards, centers, like any position that you can think of, he's out there guarding them. And yeah, he's been a joy to watch, and it's been awesome to see his improvement this year. And again, another guy that I think deserves a spotlight for how well he's played for the Nuggets and how important I think he's going to become playoff time. Because there's sometimes where it's like they take out Porter or they take out Gordon because, say Porter's not a good enough defender on the guy, or Gordon needs to come out for a rest, and it's like P-Watt can step right into that role defensively that Gordon's doing, or he can come in and now you got another defender on the court next to Gordon. You can lock up two guys. I think that's huge for facing teams like the Suns, the Mavericks, a lot of these teams in the Western Conference that have those two guys. They're just able to kill you from an offensive perspective, and you still have KCP next to that as well, which is I think a big reason why this team is top 10 defensively, right? It's something you don't think about a lot. And another guy you don't think about a lot on the defensive end is Nikola Jokic. Obviously, the two-time MVP and should have been three-time MVP, and I'll say that for sure, and we'll just leave that there. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I think right now is leading the odds to be the MVP this year. He's been amazing. Had he won it last year, that would have been 4 straight. I didn't look up when the last time 4 straight was. But yeah, I don't know if there's ever even been 4 straight MVPs, to be honest. Off the top of the head, I'd have to look that up. But yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that Nikola Jokic is on my team and not other teams, because he's just such a good basketball player. There's no other way to put it. I mean, he is genuinely one of the best basketball players I've ever watched play the game. And when we look at his case for MVP this year, first off, I did want to touch on that defensive side of things. He plays better defense than a lot of people think. I think the perspective on him from the media has changed a lot since when he first started in the NBA, right? When he first came into the NBA, it was like, oh, this guy's shit at defense. Now it's like, oh, okay, he's solid. But I do think he's a little bit more than solid. I mean, obviously, I don't love looking at advanced numbers. I think a lot of it you can look at actual games. I remember at that Raptors game, I think he had like 4 steals and 2 blocks, and they all came like in the second quarter, and it's what stirred us back into the game to have that comeback to win a game where you were down 22. But when you look at the advanced numbers, I mean, he has advanced numbers to compare to Larry Nance and Jared Allen, both guys that are looked at as very good defenders, right? I mean, he gets just as many steals per game as Larry Nance. Actually, I think he gets more. And then Jared Allen, he blocks the shots almost as much as Jared Allen. So, yeah, I think he probably isn't as good of a defender as those two, but from an advanced stats perspective, and I mean, just a steals and blocks perspective as well, he does defend almost as good as those guys. But his bread and butter is always going to be on the offensive side of things. This year, he's averaging more assists than he did either of his MVP seasons. Had he won it last year, he almost averaged a triple-double last year. It's gone down a little bit to about 9 assists per game rather than 9.8 assists per game last year. But his scoring's gone up. His rebounding's gone up since last year. His steals are the same. His blocks have gone up since last year. Actually tied for averaging a career high with 0.9 blocks per game. And yeah, I mean, he's been amazing. There's no other way to put it. He truly is just a system as a player, right? When you look at how good him and Jamal's two-man game is, how he's always able to find the backdoor cutter, whether that's Aaron Gordon or whoever, right? Christian Braun, Peyton Watson, all guys that just feed off of how well he is at playmaking. And there's not something that I can say about Nikola Jokic that hasn't already been said. Right. When you look at his shooting percentage, 91 percentile. When you look at his offensive rebounding, 86 percentile. When you look at an offensive load, 99th percentile, meaning he has as hard of a load on the NBA level of like carrying the offense as anybody in the entire league, which I think is apparent. His creation percentage, just as high, 99th percentile. His defensive rebounding is literally 100th percentile. He's the best defensive rebounder in the league. Deflections, 86 percentile. I think that's where, you go to the steals, right? I think he's a lot better at like getting his hands on the ball and being able to create fast break opportunities for the team, which I think is huge because we have a lot of guys that really do thrive on the fast break. I don't think Jamal is as good on it as he used to be before some of his injuries, because I remember back in the day, like Jamal, you had to watch out for Jamal because he would dunk it on you. I remember that dunk on the one guy from the Bucks. I can't even remember his name. It was a few years ago that got called as an offensive foul, and it was like, that was dunk of the year, and it was like a bullshit call, but it was like, dude, that was dunk of the year. So obviously he didn't quite do that as often anymore, but Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson and Christian Braun, they make up for it. They get the high flyer dunks. Obviously DeAndre Jordan has his like 1 or 2 games a year where he'll go out there and he just becomes prime DeAndre Jordan for 20 minutes that he gets that game or whatever. But yeah, I mean, Nikola Jokic has just been amazing. Even 71st percentile in block percentage, I think is insane, considering a lot of people don't really look at him like that. Like, people don't expect Nikola Jokic to be that good of a shot blocker. But yeah, I think he's a lot better of a defender than a lot of people think. But again, it's the offensive side of things, and I do think he should be the MVP this year. am on record saying that Luka would be my MVP if they were the top 5 seed. It's still possible, right? They're 2 games behind the New Orleans Pelicans. They currently sit at the 7 seed, and so it's possible. I honestly, and I don't know, this might be wrong of me. I just write Tatum out of the conversation pretty much entirely. First off, he just hasn't really, I don't think they really beat the Nuggets like that. And obviously, you can go back to that nationally televised game a couple weeks ago where it was like he didn't show up. It was all Jaylen Brown, right? And I think everybody saw that game. But honestly, there's just so much, like, obviously I talk about all the talent around on, the Nuggets and stuff like that, but a lot of that is because Jokic is the system. Like, Tatum isn't a system over there. He plays with a lot of all-stars. I think there's a difference there. So I almost write him out of the conversation. I do think Giannis probably needs to get more talk about it, but I wouldn't put him there either. I think the team hasn't had the success that they were expected to, and I almost would have left him out of the conversation entirely prior to the year starting. But because Dame struggled so much early and they struggled to really get their thing together, that I do think he crawls a little bit more into the conversation than a lot of people would think. I think he's had a phenomenal year himself, though I don't think the team success has really been there. And obviously, you've had a change of coach, and there's a lot of reasons for it. You bring in another superstar level player that you got to match and figure out how to play with, which I think they've done better of recently. But I'd still put him behind Jokic with a significant gap. And then the next guy is Shea. Right, the next guy's Shea. He's sitting obviously at the 2 seed right behind Denver. He has a 3-1 record versus the Nuggets. And I do think that he does have a lot going for him in that conversation. Right now, he's the second highest odds right now. Jokic has an 88% chance or an implied chance to win it. Shea has a 13% implied chance, and then it goes down from there. Luke having 5, and Giannis and Tatum tied for about 1% implied chances to win it. So I guess if you want to get your bets in, don't bet on Jokic because he's a negative 750 to win it compared to a plus 650 from Shea. That's a pretty big difference just from a betting angle. But yeah, I like what Shea's done, and I do think that the Thunder are so much better than I thought that they were even going to be. But I also don't expect them to really do anything in the playoffs. And Thunder fans are probably going to get mad at me for that, but I see this team as probably a second-round exit, just being brutally honest. I think there's so much good going on in OKC, and the fact that they're the 2 seed is amazing. This was a team that I was like, oh yeah, they'll be like a 6 or a 5 seed this year, and they might be able to get one playoff win, or not one playoff win, win one round. This is a team that could go to the conference finals very realistically. If I had to bet, probably not because of how deep the Western Conference is and how inexperienced they are. And Shea's had a phenomenal year, but I do think there's just, and I mean, this is kind of, I guess, wild to say when you're looking at 51 wins versus 49 wins right now, but there is literally levels to it. And I do think Jokic got robbed last year for the MVP, right? I think a lot of it was media narrative, right? I think he did have a better year than Embiid. And so I do think from that standpoint, he is deserving, and it's kind of like a redemption arc for him. If you want to put the, I guess, media narrative on it, right? Which I think the MVP has a lot of a narrative tied to it. But I don't know. There's something about, like, yes, Shea has the head-to-heads, but I just don't see him as the MVP. And that might just be the bias for me, but I don't think he's a better player than Jokic, and I don't think that he's done as much for his team as Jokic. I think a lot of the Thunder's improvement is a lot of those additions that they've had. I think J-Dub has taken another step. I think Chet coming in and being one of the best rookies we've seen in years. Obviously, Wemby outshines him, but Chet is still one of the best rookies we've seen in years. And then, across the board, just all their young guys just taking another level. I think a lot of that applies to why they've been so good. And I mean, Shea's another one of those guys that's gotten to another level this year, but I just don't think it's on Nikola Jokic's level, and there's no other way to put that. So, yeah, I think Jokic should be the MVP and will be the MVP and potentially a 2-time champion come the end of the season. But if you guys enjoyed, make sure you guys drop a like and subscribe for more. I will link the video that kind of detailed how we won our first championship on the left side of the screen if you guys want to go watch that. I spent a ton of time making that after we won the championship. It's actually my most viewed video, so I appreciate you guys for that. And we did just hit 800 subscribers, so thank you all for that. And yeah, that's going to do it for me here today. It's been your boy Dom, and I will catch you all next time. Peace out, guys.
You're the 4th player in NBA Finals history to record the line that you had today, joining like LeBron, KD, and Tim Duncan. What do you think about when you hear that?
It's not a big 23, 12, and 4. 4th ever, the 23, 10, and 4. Oh,